whether they're in a math course, or a science course or psychology or any of the different courses in the college, the professional schools, and any other students that need assistance. Our mission statement is threefold. We are a resource center where we provide computer-assisted tutorials, CDs, and DVDs for all of the students that are in those courses, whether they're preparing for graduate school exams or professional licensing. We're also a tutoring center, and that's for any student who needs assistance in math or stat, regardless of their course, whether it's during the center's 6 days on site or through e-tutoring throughout the week. And lastly, we're the site of development and implementations of workshops designed to broaden students' quantitative literacy and critical thinking skills across the entire curriculum. We have a number of goals, but there are actually 5 that are the major ones. First one is the obvious one, which is to increase awareness of the Dolciani Center and its services, to provide quality academic support services to students both on the undergraduate level and the graduate level, to provide different types of learning materials that allow for different learning style choices, to assist students in the development of independent learning strategies and the development of skills that are necessary to be successful in their courses, and to be able to demonstrate such confidence in those skills. And lastly, to enable students to see the connections of math, stat, and QR through their personal lives, and to conduct workshops to encourage students to see these connections. We do that in a number of ways, and you can relax. I'm not going through all of these. This is just to give you an idea of the different services that we provide. Boot camps, problem sessions, study skills, tutoring, both small group and individual, tutoring using the computer, and referrals and early alerts. When we assess our programs, we look at 5 big areas. Our assessment encompasses that of the early alerts and referrals, our study skills workshops, our tutoring, our general workshops, and our usage. And so what I wanted to do now was to just give you an idea of what we do for each one. So for our early alerts and referrals, we look at the numbers of students who were referred. And we also look at the numbers who came and were successful.
I'm on the meeting.
Versus the number of students who didn't come.
Olga is at the front desk.
And so if you look at our different semesters, you can see that our numbers that have referred are definitely going up. Fall and spring, we're now up to 1,500 students in the spring that were referred to us. When we look at the past 2 years, we don't have our data complete yet from fall, but if we look at the past 2 years, we can look and see, which shouldn't be a surprise in a sense, that students who came to the center and got a grade of C or better is roughly between 70 and 80% versus those who didn't come, generally in the 50s and 60s. So in fact, what we do is we tell students when we do our outreaches that we have seen that students who come to the center who are at risk definitely do better than students who don't come. We also look at our math study skills programs, and we've been doing this for the last, I guess, 15 years. And so we look at our grades and courses, we look at the facilitator evaluations, we read our free response comments, and we do a pre-post survey. So our grades and courses, again, going back over 2 years, we can see that students who come to our study skills workshops definitely do well in the course that they're taking. Do they do better, or do they do as well as students who don't come to study skills? That's something that's a little difficult to determine, but in fact, we do see that the study skills is having a positive effect. When we look at our facilitator evaluations, we evaluate our facilitators using the Likert scale. And so we can see that with 5 being the greatest that our tutors can get, our composite scores are pretty decent, from maybe 4, 4.5 straight through to roughly just about 5. Our free response comments vary from semester to semester, but what we see from our students is that they're writing about the fact that they did get support. I pulled 3 comments just so that you can see. She helped me understand strategies I could utilize going forward for reading the textbook, taking notes, etc. Another one talked about everyone gets to share their problems with studying and taking tests, and we work collaboratively to learn how to improve them. And then finally, I learned a lot of new skills in addition to the psychology behind learning more effectively. We also do a pre-post survey. We survey our students before they begin the workshop and then after the workshop to see how they feel on several different items. So as you can see, before they started the workshop, they were not as strong in various areas as they are when they're done. So for us, that's a positive thing. I think one of the things that we need to make sure our students know is how to deal with studying in a math course. And so we talk about the differences between studying in a math course and studying in a non-math course, because we all know there are different ways that you can learn. We also evaluate our tutoring by comparing grades and by overall tutoring evaluations. So if we compare the grades of students who came for tutoring during the last 2 years, we can see that we feel we are successful in that 76% or greater of the students who have come for tutoring wind up with greater than or a C or greater in their course. You should know that the students who are coming generally are students who are not doing well in the course and are at risk. So in fact, this shows that we are doing well. How does it compare with students overall in the course? I decided I wasn't going to put the data up there to share information about the math department, but what I can tell you is that our grades of our students in those courses are either at the same level or higher than the success rate of students who are in the course overall. And lastly, we evaluate our tutors. So our tutors, again, have been getting very positive evaluations from our students. So we're very pleased about that. And lastly, we look at, that first goal, which is to get the word out about what we do. So what we do is at the end of the semester, we do an evaluation of the overall center and we send it to all students and we ask them to evaluate our services if they use them. And if they did not use them, we ask them why they didn't come and use the center. So we also then get a sense of how many students use the center. As you can see, during COVID, our numbers definitely dipped. That is consistent within City University. Our colleagues in other campuses have said that their attendance in the centers has dropped to between 40 and 50%. So we're about there, but as you can see in the spring, we are in fact coming up since we've got at least 7,000 to date. So that gives you a little bit of a brief overview of the data that we collect in Dolciani. And if there are any questions, Joel, I don't know if you want to do it now or at the end with all of us, but whichever.
Thanks, Barbara. Does anyone have any questions for Barbara now, or you can hold them for after the other presentations if you like?
Thank you,
Okay.
Barbara.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying thank you, Barbara. That was really nice. Great work.
Great, thank you.
All right. Well, the next presenter alphabetically would be Jack Kenigsberg from the Rockowitz Writing Center. Jack, are you ready to go?
Sure. Let me go ahead and see about sharing if that works. No, that's not clearly what that's clearly not what I wanted to share. There we go. Okay. That should be this. All right. So I'm hoping to, some of the things I think that we do are very similar to what Barbara does. I think that's probably not very much of a surprise. I don't think I'm going to cover as many sources of data collection as she did. But just a brief overview of the center. We've been here at Hunter for almost 50 years now. In the mid 80s, we moved from the English department. So we are now formally outside of any academic department. We're within the provost's office. We have a large history, though, of working specifically on standardized exams that govern entrance. The WAT was the writing assessment test. That was the entrance writing exam. And there was like a formal tutoring program for that, and when they changed entrance exams, we maintained that through the ACT and then through the CAT-W, although I think that has now been retired. In around 2000, CUNY instituted this exam that students would take at the end of a community college and the middle of a four-year college. So after their sophomore year, the CUNY proficiency exam. And we had a formal tutoring program for people who had failed the CPE once. Also in 2000, the CUNY Board of Trustees required all colleges to officially have a writing across the curriculum program. And at Hunter, that meant that my predecessor in this role, Dennis Pioli, also who is here on this call, also became the co-coordinator of WAC. So there was like an intimate relationship between the Writing Center and the Writing Across the Curriculum. So, which is a way of branching out of the English department, and rather English, specifically English exam concerns. We are a general writing center for the whole college. In 2012, we transferred from paper records to electronic records, which facilitates a lot of the data collection that we do. In 2017, so this is pre-pandemic, we started e-tutoring. And of course, in the pandemic, we actually started synchronous tutoring. So that's a really, really brief history of a very brief history of some of the very small things that we do. I'm not going to really go through the mission, but I do want to highlight that from our mission for students, we have a number of very specific goals. We want them to become better writers. We want them to improve their reading and writing processes. We want them to actively participate. And we want to service all courses in the college. For tutors, you want them to work as peers. You want them to focus on the writing process. You want them to ask questions. We want them to prioritize things. And we want to create non-judgmental learning environments. And for this one, we're really going to focus on two of the goals that we have for students to become better writers. And the fact that we try to support all courses in the college. For trying to assess how well we do in terms of helping them improve as writers, there's no way for us to do that directly. Students come in with writing at various points of their process. We work with them at that point. We never see the end result. So we have no before or after snapshot. We have a before snapshot. We don't have an after snapshot. We could ask a student here or there, but there's no way we could have it consistently to really, really gain something. So we're forced into a lot of the same indirect measures that Barbara was talking about, which is basically for us grades. We track a number of courses very, very specifically. We track English 120, which is the required composition 1 at Hunter. There are a number of courses that satisfy composition 2, the one that is offered the most, just in terms of the most sections, is English 220, but there are a few other courses like Media 211 or AFPRL 238 that also satisfy that requirement. We track those. Among the other Hunter core requirements is something called the US diversity, the US in its diversity. We track those because those are a very small number of courses that are all writing intensive. And they include History 151, History 152, Poli-Sci 110, Anthropology, Cultural Anthropology 100, and a philosophy course, which I forget the number is, but it's African American political philosophy. And we also track Psych 250 because we were asked to by the Psych department. It's their big writing course, and it's the biggest major in the college. And you can see that the green bars, and just for a few years, the DFW rate generally for all these courses combined generally hovers somewhere between 16.5% to 19%. And for the students who don't come to the Writing Center, it's slightly higher. And for the ones who do come to the Writing Center, it is significantly lower. And we do have that broken down by course, but I just didn't want to go on course by course. I only have until fall 20 because this is not something that it's very easy for us to do ourselves to do this. And it was just difficult in the middle of the pandemic getting people from IR to help us with some of these numbers. So I apologize that the data set is incomplete, but this is a pretty consistent every year, every semester. In 2018, or rather I should say that this is all, despite the fact that this looks really, really good, it's also very correlative. There's very little way for us to claim anything resembling causation, because the students who come to the Writing Center, which is entirely voluntary, are different than students who don't come to the Writing Center, possibly in significant ways. And so we're very, very aware of this. But in 2018, we did a propensity score matching study where we looked at students who came to the Writing Center in the fall 2016 semester who were taking English 120, which is the single biggest driver to the Writing Center in fall semesters. And we matched each student to a student who did not come to the center, but who was basically in some ways, their academic doppelgangers. Same high school GPA, same SAT score, a lot of other demographic and academic markers. And in the unmatched set, we clearly, students who came to the Writing Center clearly performed better. But even with the match set, the students who came to the Writing Center also clearly performed better than students who did not. And that gives us maybe not a claim toward causality, but something a lot closer to that. And so I think this is probably unsurprising that students who seek assistance with their coursework do better on their coursework. I don't think that's much of a surprise, but it's nice to have something degree of confirmation. We also can assess how well we are attracting students from across the college. Despite the fact that English 120 and English 220 are the two biggest drivers, you can see that undergrads, we routinely see students from 40 to 50 separate departments in undergrad, and something like 15 to 30 graduate programs across the college. So not necessarily in equal amounts, of course, but we are, as a general Writing Center, we are, I think, doing a decent job getting students from all different programs because they all require writing. And then the other thing that I think that is kind of interesting is if we're going to work with students who are working on courses all across the college, that implies that they are not necessarily at 68th Street, because there are many courses that are offered away from 68th Street. So in the past year, we started asking students, where are they taking the majority of their courses? And this is self-reported data. And the majority of the students who do come to us are here at 68th Street or online. Many more students who are primarily taking classes online in the fall than right now. But we do get a small number of students from Brookdale, Silverman, and Hudson Street, which is nice. And some students who are not taking classes in that particular semester. And so it's nice to know that we're getting at least some people from outside of 68th Street. But I think this also clearly shows that we really need to do more outreach to the Brookdale campuses and the Silverman campus, because there are many more than like a couple dozen students on those campuses who could use help with writing. A common misconception at Writing Centers is that we are somehow an ESL helping factory, but our students report, in fact, almost every semester, a slight majority of students are native English speakers or bilingual English speakers, and around 40 to 45% identify as non-native speakers as their first language. We ask them specifically what language they speak, what was their first or home language. And the two most common languages are Spanish and Chinese, which is, again, I think not surprising if you've ever walked the halls of Hunter, but also Hunter is officially an Asian American Pacific Islander serving institution. And we are also a Hispanic serving institution. And so we are drawing on those, on the student body on a fairly representative basis And the demographics, I think, are tricky. And this is like where I want to get into, and this will be the end. I think we started getting, once we got access to EAB Navigate, we started being able to look at some of the other things, but EAB Navigate has a small difficulty with this, is that whenever you look at data from EAB Navigate, you get data as it currently is, which means if you're trying to look up student demographics, you must look, if you want them for the full 2020 semester, you must look in full 2020. We looked at it after the spring 2021 semester, and it was very surprising to us that we had 33 freshmen, because we knew we had hundreds of English 120 students. And then it was like, obvious, no. After the spring 21 semester, 33 of the students that we saw in fall were still currently freshmen. But many of them had become sophomores, and many of the sophomores had become juniors by that point. So that presents us with a problem of data collection. EAB Navigate doesn't give you frozen snapshots in time, it gives you whatever's current. And so this is a problem for looking up grades, this is a problem for a number of other things, to make sure that we're getting really current GPAs, current statuses. I will say in terms of grade, this is very funny. I just learned like a month ago how to look up student grades in Navigate, and they don't record W's. So it's impossible to get an accurate DFW report on my own because they don't record W's, which means that I have to wait for IR. So I guess the upshot is that there's a lot of data that we can collect and we can assess how we're doing. And then there's certain things that we could use help with from other units of the college to actually help us do a better job of understanding the students that we're seeing. And that is what I got for you.
Thank you, Jack. Very interesting numbers, very interesting presentation. All right. Next up, we have Christina Medina-Ramirez from the Skirball Science Center. There you go.
Everyone can see my screen now, right? Okay. Thank you for having us here today to share the work that we have been doing. So today I'm going to focus, well, what I'll show you from our data is what we were able to accomplish during the remote period, because there's a lot of talk about what we all lost and what students lost, but we actually seen some successes and some growth during that time. So we're the babies of the learning centers. So we haven't been around for 50 years, we've been around for 5 years. So we were established in March of 2017 when the 7th floor of the library opened. We are one of 3 academic learning centers. You already heard from math and writing centers. And we replaced previous science learning centers. So there was the Socrates Center that was housed in biology, and the Physical Science Learning Center that focused on on chemistry and physics courses. So those centers dissolved and Skirball became the main science learning center. So our mission is to provide comprehensive assistance to 100 college students in all areas of natural sciences and technology. We aim to create a supportive learning environment for all students by providing academic support services, collaborative interdisciplinary learning community, and engaging workshops and activities. And so some of our desired outcomes for students who use the center is, well, our primary goal is that students will have improved course grades and retention in STEM majors and in their courses. We want to enhance their science self-efficacy and sense of belonging in STEM. And we want to see higher STEM graduation rates and entrance into the scientific workforce. So of course, the outcomes for grades will be a result of what we do for academic support. And some of these other things we hope are more like side effects of what we do and being part of the Skirball community, working with peers, that some of these things will also come about. So for our academic support services, the ones that are in bold are the main things that we do every semester, which is group peer learning, also known as tutoring. We changed the name. We try not to use the term tutoring too much with students because it has a little bit of a negative connotation for students. So we call it group peer learning. We have supplemental instruction and pre-course boot camps. And occasionally we have problem-solving workshops, peer-led study groups, exam reviews, and we are doing some one-to-one peer consultations for students who are on early alert. So some of the primary assessment questions we have are about the center usage and student engagement. So who's coming to our center, how many students, what services and courses they're using, grade outcomes. Do students who use our services have higher passing rates and retention? And we also want student feedback. So what do students actually perceive as being effective for them? And what suggestions do they have for what they want to see at our center? So some of the tools we use to collect data are Navigate. So all our appointments are through Navigate. So every visit is recorded, every appointment is recorded through Navigate. And Navigate connects to student profiles, so we are able to see the data of students who come to our center and have that connected to who they are. Institutional data, as Jack and others have mentioned, you know, due to we haven't been able to have much data from institutional research as there was transition. So we hope to engage more with institutional research to get more data to understand what we're doing. End of year surveys, intermediate assessments, quick polls, appointment surveys, pre and post surveys for workshops and boot camps. And we are going to start doing some student focus groups this summer. So we don't really know a lot about who uses our services. So we don't have any comprehensive report on student demographics, but we do have some idea about who's coming to our centers and how they use our center, just based on just smaller evaluations of different things that we've done. So generally, students who use our services are well matched to the Hunter STEM population. So we see a wide range of abilities, and the average GPAs are comparable. It may be slightly better for students who use our services, but it's not a very drastic difference. We tend to have people, more regular users than people who are just coming in for just one stop or one question. So we have many people who use the center weekly, and another group of students who tend to come 1 to 2 weeks before exams. And averages are around like 3 to 5 visits per student per semester, depending on the course. We have less engagement with students who really need us most, which is an area we want to improve. So low attendance from students who were referred by early alert. And we see many students who did not pass a STEM course, that they never engaged with our center. And even after that course the STEM course that they failed, and after they take additional STEM courses, they still don't come for help at our center. So this is an area where we need to work on. So now I'm going to show you some of our data from our remote period to give you an idea of what engagement was like and what some of the outcomes were while we were completely virtual. So we had 0 virtual support before the pandemic. So March 20th is when we started tutoring virtual. So we got everything from completely in person to completely online, and just some days, which was an interesting time. And thanks to the help of a lot of our tutors who really, made that happen. We had over 8,000 virtual visits during the pandemic period. And so group tutoring and drop-in tutoring are really the same service. So we had almost 4,000 for tutoring, over 3,000 for supplemental instruction. And this is for Bio 100 and Bio 102 courses. Workshops and events was mostly our Bio 100 boot camp and some chemistry review sessions. That was the total for most of our visits. In terms of the course distribution, prior to the remote period, chemistry, general chemistry, organic chemistry was really our top used courses. Biology, we always struggled a bit to get students to come, but since implementing supplemental instruction, which I'll tell you a little bit more details about as we go on in this presentation, we really saw attendance skyrocket over the pandemic for Bio 100. So one of our challenges with evaluating is not having a high enough end to really say something significant about the outcomes. But this was a really great opportunity to really pick apart what was happening with these students. And so I'm going to show you some data from Bio 100 and also sample data from Chem 224, which is organic chemistry too. Okay, so this is an example of great outcomes for organic chemistry. So if they did not come to Skirball at all for tutoring, the passing rate, which is ABC or credits, was 78%. And here we show the more they came, the better they did. So for students who came regularly 4 more times, their passing rate was up to 96%. And typically, just historically, just looking at for different courses, tutored versus not tutored, we usually see a difference between 10 and 15%. So anything below 10, we're not too happy about, and anything above 15%, we considered a really great success for a course. Even anything above 10 is considered okay for us. So, I'm gonna now show you what it looks like breaking it down when we have multiple interventions for a single course and what are the impacts of those different services. So I'm going to show you data from spring 2021 for the Bio 100 course. So we had Bio 100 winter boot camp and supplemental instruction for this course. We also had tutoring for this course, but those numbers were kind of low and not very significant to include here. So just a little bit about our boot camp. So the winter boot camp is during the winter session before students take the Bio 100 course in the spring. So this is a first year gateway course for STEM majors for many who are on the pre-med track. And it's also a course that is very challenging. So our boot camp was a 3-part series. It was all virtual this winter. We have been doing this boot camp in person also for some years. So it's peer-led, 3-part series. So they have like about 2 hours of instruction each day. And some of the major goals of the boot camp, it's not to flood the student with content, but it's really just more to get them comfortable and ready to engage with the course. So we familiarize students with the basics about the course. We review a little bit of general chemistry content and how they might see general chemistry appear in biology. We give them skills for answering the multiple choice questions. So the multiple choice questions on these exams are very in-depth and challenging. They learned some study strategies, and we introduced them to what resources they can use to help them succeed, including the services that we offer. And we hope to change the students' attitude or growth mindset. And I'm putting stars here because I'll show you a little bit more about these 2 points later. We had really great attendance. So out of the 803 student enrollment, we had 277 who actually completed 3-part series. We had more attend and not complete, but 277 actually stood the whole, the 3 days. For supplemental instruction, this is services that we offer throughout the semester. So these are weekly peer-led collaborative content review sessions where the supplemental instruction leaders, which are the peer leaders, design activities to help the students learn the most difficult content. So the students don't just learn what to learn, but they also learn how to learn. We hope that they build confidence through this active participation, enhance collaborative learning skills, and of course, you know, we want them to reduce the DFW rates. So, and we had great engagement with this service. So 282 students out of the 803 student enrollment. So here's our outcomes for supplemental instruction. So students who did not come for supplemental instruction at all, 56% passing ABC or credit. If they came 1 to 4 times, 65%. And if you can see there's like a dose effect. The more they come, the better they did. And if they came 10 or more times, which is about weekly or almost weekly, if they came just about almost every week, 88% passed. And just it's important to note here also that 58% of the students who completed the boot camp actually came to supplemental instruction. So a great outcome of the boot camp was that students then, we had some buy-in to come use these services. Compared to 21% of students, the ones who didn't come to boot camp, we were only able to grab 21% of those students to come to supplemental instruction. So here I'm gonna show you now combined the boot camp with supplemental instruction. So if they only came to boot camp, there was, you know, some impact, 66%, but it was really what they did after the boot camp, engaging in resources and coming to supplemental instruction that made the difference. So, you know, we would say that, you know, one of the major successes of the boot camp is having students now utilize resources, whether it was at Skirball or maybe office hours, but it was definitely, you know, looking at what students did after that that made the difference, because just sitting there 3 days and hearing the skills about what you should do to pass and not actually doing those things isn't going to help, right? So I also looked at now with these interventions, if it had any impact on retention. So if students who came to supplemental instruction or came to Skirball at any time for this course, whether they were enrolled in the spring or not. I mean, in spring 2022, this semester or not, they still enrolled as 100 students. So if they hadn't come to Skirball, it was 88%, 81% were still enrolled this spring. And those who came to Skirball 10 or more times for any service, this is for Bio 100 in particular, 92% are still here as 100 students. What I didn't look at yet was whether they are still STEM majors. And so perhaps the differences might actually be even greater, whether they are still STEM major or not. So we also want to know, you know, the numbers show that students are improving, but we want to know if students kind of felt like the support they received really made a difference for them. So this is our growth mindset wall at Hunter to try to kind of instill some of these positive attitudes in students about the courses they're coming for. So in the Bio 100 Bootcamp, we every year, and this has been consistent every year for the 5 or more times that we've done this bootcamp, we do a word cloud where we ask students at the start of the bootcamp, give me one word to describe your current impression of the Bio 100 course. And you see that many have these negative words: challenging, difficult, scary, intimidating, nervous, scary, right? And then we ask them after the 3 days the same question, and their attitudes completely change. And this is really, like I said, every year we see this with every group that we work with. It's more positive. So now they're thinking it's manageable. It's still challenging for sure, but there's less negative words and more words that imply that they feel that they can take on this challenge. And then we ask them also one word to describe their experience in the boot camp, and we have some positive feedback that it was helpful, informative, reassuring, right? So this is just a sample of our just a portion of our end of year survey. So this is looking at supplemental instruction. So we asked them both questions about, some questions are to understand whether our supplemental instruction leaders are doing the things that we expect them to do, like encouraging students to answer each other's questions, etc. But there's some questions here that get at how the students felt about it. So 83% of respondents felt like SI had a positive impact on their grades. 96% felt that the topics were relevant and useful. And many felt like it helped them understand what they do and do not. I helped them to identify what they do and do not understand. They would attend for future courses. And this year, SI helped me to feel more connected to classmates. So remember, this was a virtual, these students were completely remote. So I think anything here that helped them to feel connected, we have 57% said that it helped them to feel more connected to their classmates. And just lastly, I want to tell you about Project Fresh, which is a 5-year NSF grant awarded to the college. It's an NSF HSI institutional transformation grant. So first year retention and equity in STEM at Hunter is what we will be calling this project from here on out. And so some of the goals of this grant is to improve retention of Black and Latinx students by transforming their first year experience in STEM. So this is a very research focused project. So the grant leadership team includes people from the School of Education, advising different science departments and learning centers. So the way the Learning Center, Skirball, will be involved, it will help us to really apply some research questions to the work we're doing and disseminate results, examine the equity value of our current services, and to implement new interventions such as the Fresh Summer Institute that will be happening this summer, which will be an orientation for new students. And we already started doing some of our first studies. So this year's winter boot camp, we did pre and post surveys on the students about sense of belonging, academic self-efficacy for STEM, science identity, intentions to leave STEM, and their overall experience in the boot camp. So we're evaluating this data now. And that's all. Thank you. And if anybody wants to connect, here's my LinkedIn, my email, and thanks for having us.
Thanks so much, Christina. Wow, some really strong results there. But I will leave overall commentary and questions till after Vanderie has had a chance to go. Let me just make sure I get the full name of the center correct. Vanderie Vielie is Interim Director of the Percy Ellis Sutton Search for Education, Elevation, and Knowledge Program, better known as SEEK. Thank you, Vanderie.
Hi, thank you, Joel. Excuse me. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for having me. So SEEK is, as Joel mentioned, the Search for Education, Elevation, and Knowledge. The SEEK program is the Educational Opportunity Program in the CUNY four-year senior schools. I'm not sure if anyone here is familiar with higher education opportunity programs. You can give me a little thumbs up emoji if you've heard of any in the past. There's in the SUNY system, there is the Educational Opportunity Program, EOP. I was part of that as a student, and I benefited from that as a graduate student as well. They have an extension called GOP, Graduate Opportunity Program. In the private schools, there's the Arthur O. Eve Higher Education Opportunity Program. And then, as I mentioned, in CUNY, we have in the community colleges, there's College Discovery. And then in the senior colleges, we have SEEK. So SEEK is the opportunity program for the four-year CUNY colleges. All opportunity programs, higher education opportunity programs, were born out of the civil rights movement. And they, SEEK in particular was created in 1966. And it was created to provide access for those who would not otherwise have access. And there's much more than just, creating that access. You also have to make sure that the persistence is, that piece is there as well. So the overall mission of SEEK is to provide access to higher education to historically underserved students, to increase their level of education, social capital, and workforce preparedness. SEEK fulfills its mission by providing a range of specialized support and enrichment programs and activities dedicated to encouraging our students' learning, performance, persistence, and graduation. So the goal, I put kind of like a big picture overarching goal, but really it's to provide these holistic and wraparound services that enable students to persist and graduate, but there's a lot of personal growth that happens along the way. So SEEK was brought into this discussion because we do have a learning center as well, a very small learning center that provides tutoring. And this is done, through one-on-one or very small group tutoring, no more than 3 to 4 people. It's a fraction of the size of the other learning centers. And we also encourage our students to utilize those other learning centers that everyone's done such a wonderful job of explaining right now, because they might have the tutor that better explains the certain course, or someone they work with better. And we don't offer every single subject, right? Because we are a very small learning center, that component of our program. That's a small component of our program. The rest, our program actually has quite a few services. So probably the most fundamental would be counseling. From orientation to graduation, students have the same counselor that they work with that whole 4 to 5 year period. So that really creates that relationship and that trust, right? So that they can actually kind of hopefully hear what the counselor has to say and take the advice, right? And learn along the way. Counseling is developmental and intrusive, definitely intrusive sometimes, right? While students are supposed to see their counselors on a regular basis, it's a required part of the program. Enforcing that is really hard, right? But that they should be, especially depending upon their level, freshmen should be seeing their counselor once a week. Sophomore a little bit less, junior a little bit less, because as they become more rooted and secure in the college, they need to see their counselor less frequently. But as I said, it's definitely still intrusive, right? If we don't hear from you, if we can't find you, we are going to look for you. We're going to call you, we're going to text you. There's been times where people have shown up to a class because you're concerned, you haven't seen someone, you haven't heard from them, and you want to see what's going on. Because unfortunately, students do have a tendency to kind of hide when things tend to go wrong. They just avoid. And, you know, no matter how many times we tell them at orientation and meetings, like, don't avoid, come talk to us, because usually we can help you find a different avenue, right? Instead of getting the WU, if we'd have spoken about this, maybe you could have gotten it incomplete, or, you know, done an appeal or something. If you just kind of just drop off the planet, it's really hard for us to help you. So we definitely do intrusive counseling. Tutoring, I already touched on. We have a very small tutoring center. Right now, I think we have about 11 tutors, our Seek Learning Center. That's also a requirement. Again, hard to enforce. You know, we do put stops on their accounts for the freshmen in particular, that if they're not attending once a week, right, that hold will be there. They'll see there's a Seek hold. So what that mean? That means you probably haven't seen your counselor, you probably haven't gone to tutoring. It's also mandatory if they're on academic probation. But again, making something required and kind of, you know, seeing it and having it actually happen it's still difficult. And, you know, we're still kind of searching to find a less punitive way, you know, of having that Seek hold. We would like students to engage with the services, not because they have to, you know, get the Seek hold removed, but because they see the value in tutoring, as Christina and Jack and Barbara have all mentioned. You know, we do talk about the statistics of, you know, attending tutoring versus not, how you could go from like a B to an A, right? This isn't something that you wait until things aren't going well. No, you want to start tutoring right away from the beginning so you can get the best grades possible. Seek students also have a, it's the Orientation for Success seminar that they take their freshman, the fall semester of their freshman year. It's taught by their assigned counselor. So this is for incoming freshmen and also incoming transfer students. A big part of this seminar is really helping them create community, because it can be very intimidating. There's what, 26,000 students at Hunter now. And being part of this big, you know, intimidating environment, Seek creates that community, and it makes it a little bit smaller and a little bit kind of less intimidating. So part of an unofficial part of the course is to really help facilitate that community, because the freshmen are in the course with students that they did, excuse me, the summer bridge, which I'll get to in a second. They're in that seminar with, you know, their peers that they spent the summer with for the Seek Summer Bridge. And the transfers, it's very hard, as we all know, I'm sure. It's very hard for transfer students to acclimate to Hunter and you know, do well in that process of kind of acclimating and finding their home here. So the transfer seminar, the Seek transfer seminar, really helps with that as well, because now they're in an environment with other transfer students, with their counselor. And then the learning outcomes is, you know, for them to understand the different policies, you know, like what's a WU, when is our deadlines, you know, what is plagiarism, but also, you know, going over those study skills and things like that. So they also learn how to really take ownership and control of their degree here, right? Like, yes, advising, counseling and advising is here to help you pick out your classes and support you in that process. But, you know, the student needs to take ownership of that, right? You need to make sure that you're picking these classes and not just asking somebody like, okay, what class do I need to take? Like, no. So that's a big part of this class as well, is really showing them all the different tools, right? Aside from DegreeWorks, the many other tools that they can use to really take control of that. And they have a final, the course culminates with a final project of their educational action plan, which is really, it's them planning out their entire 4 years. So they put in, you know, they have to organize the core requirements, what semester, when they're going to take them, their major requirements, pluralism and diversity, all that stuff. They have it all mapped out. And now if they're intended nursing, they have to do 2 of those, unfortunately, because as everyone knows, getting into the nursing program is, you know, it's so few students who actually go into nursing. So they always have to have a plan B. So all this starts off with the Seek Summer Bridge program. And the Summer Bridge program is a 4-week, it's a 4-week program where students take non-credit bearing workshops that are meant to mimic the courses that they're going to take in the fall. So it'll be writing, English, math, and if they plan on entering, the major is going to be human bio, any, something in the sciences or nursing, then they'd also be taking chemistry. These courses are taught by non-teaching adjuncts. Again, they're non-credited, but it's to help prepare. It's to help get students prepared for their freshman year. And also, in the course of the summer program, we do fun stuff as well. We have, as that picture that everybody can see right there at the bottom corner, we have a really fun excursion to BOCES in Long Island, where there's like these different trust building, team building exercise, like climb the rope and help each other get across the, bridge or whatever. It's really fun, and we've missed that these last 2 years. And it's been a challenge doing the summer bridge virtually. But as Christina mentioned, some things have definitely, there's also been benefits from having this virtual component as well. In other areas of the program, like tutoring and counseling, it actually really increased participation because it was easier for students. The summer bridge, it was tough because a huge part of summer bridge is community building, and it's just so much harder to do that in an online setting, and we struggled to get them to turn their cameras on, and the instructors were like, look, I'm not going to know you when I see you in the hallway in the fall. So we're really excited to be back in person this summer and have our fun activities back as well. Like we'll probably go on some museum visits and things like that. And there's also workshops during the summer bridge tutoring as well. So the morning is their classes and the afternoon is either tutoring or counseling. And then every week we have a different workshop, on either the history of opportunity programs, because it's really important for them to know what this is that they're involved in. And because this is a legacy program, and also, study skills, things that are going to benefit them as incoming freshmen. So they come here in the fall, they know the buildings, they already know a lot of staff members that they've met. So it's a huge advantage for them, even though they definitely don't feel that way at first, right? Have to go to summer school, but it's only once, it's before their freshman year. And then another aspect of the program, there's also academic skills building workshops. And we have one today. It's not quite so academic focused. And I think the co-host is here. I thought I saw Caitlin, where we're going to be having a de-stress event with HCAP this afternoon in 417 West, where there'll be games and just an opportunity to really unwind and see other students and de-stress. So normally pre-pandemic, we had, game nights and a potluck that was everyone's favorite, of course, food. But then there's the time management. We had an excellent edition hosted by our social work intern this semester on self-advocacy and helping students really kind of, with those skills. And we hope to keep that workshop going. It was really popular. In fall of 2020, I introduced a more like wellness themed because it was so stressful. And so I kind of rebranded some of our workshops as a Wellness Wednesday, and I did some meditation and mindfulness, which I thought, the students would kind of be like, well, what is this? And probably make fun of me for it, but they loved it. They loved it. And with the assessments that, the evaluations, it was decided to keep that going, right? Because they wanted more of that, because it was stressful, and just having those few minutes together to kind of just do a little meditation or something and know that everyone else is doing this too, and everyone else is kind of feeling the same heaviness of the time that we're in. I think that was really helpful. I mean, the students expressed that it was helpful, so we're keeping that component for sure. So, you know, to the ways of measuring success, obviously, the metrics of like retention, graduation, gateway course, pass fail rates. After the summer bridge, the pass rates for, you know, the gateway courses like the English and the math are generally in the high 80s to 90s. And then we also, in our retention, our first year retention is really high, like high 90s. It does dip a little in that second year. And so we're starting some initiatives now. We're bringing on a non-teaching adjunct to kind of talk a little bit more specifically about major and career exploration, because it can be really hard to be engaged and persist when you kind of don't know why you're here, right? Like everyone has to know the why to really motivate them. So we're hoping that that might help with when they start to reach that point where it's time to declare a major and you're a little confused. Hopefully having this person on board to help develop a more focused workshop curriculum specifically on that process of like, you know, figuring out your major and career goals. And we do work a lot with career development services as well. Many, you know, pre-health and HCAP, prestigious scholarships for different workshops. So another method of assessment, of course, like everyone else has mentioned, surveys and evaluations, so you can hear it directly from the students, which is always helpful. So all of our surveys and evaluations are always anonymous. And we do one at the end of the summer bridge, and they seem a little bit more willing to give the negative feedback. So, and we listen. We actually, you know, got rid of an entire component because the feedback was so consistent that it wasn't really translating into helping them in, you know, in their freshman year. And it just was something that kind of, it was felt at the time could be better used to work on other things. So, you know, we do take their feedback seriously. But of course, they'll be like, oh, you know, we don't want to do tutoring or no more workshops. And like, you know, you're going to get that feedback, and sorry, that's still part of the program. But if they give us suggestions on how something can be better or what they want more of, right? That's why we're continuing with the meditation and mindfulness, because they specifically said, more of this, please. This is really helpful right now. After every tutoring session, they're encouraged to fill out anonymous tutor evaluations, which, you know, is also used to give feedback to the tutors. And I wish I had compiled some of the quotes like everyone else, because there's some really, you know, great stuff on how the tutoring has really helped them with their confidence, you know, and moving forward with their courses. Workshop evaluations, there's been some great, you know, nuggets in there as well. And also just overall counseling, because our end of semester anonymous student satisfaction survey covers every aspect of the program. We have them rate, you know, the workshops, their counseling services, the tutoring services, and also leave space for open-ended feedback. So there, you know, there can be some really, really nice comments about the difference that a counselor made. What I do find is hard to get sometimes is the feedback on how we can improve the services. I think sometimes students might be hesitant to say anything that's not as positive about someone, you know, that they're working with. Because there's always, you know, there's always ways to improve, but it's really, really great to see the positive feedback on their interactions with, you know, the different parts of the program and the different people in the program, right? And it makes a difference to us to hear those things. So it's always nice to share that with counselors, what, you know, students have said. Is mine? Oh yeah, sorry. So just some quick little pieces of information. The last couple years, you know, our retention rate, the first year retention rate is steady in the 90s usually. And for 2020, as much of a challenge as that year was an extremely high, you know, first year retention rate. In 2021, 3 of the 42 prestigious scholarship and fellowship recipients were from SEEK, which I forgot to mention in the beginning, sorry. SEEK is around 500 students right now. We're at 437. Our enrollment is always a little bit lower in the spring, and then we, get the freshman class in the fall, and it goes back up. And we have suffered some attrition throughout the pandemic, like all opportunity programs, because unfortunately, a lot of our students were impacted really severely. And part of the assessment piece, or just something that I'm hoping to get more information on, because we get, from the students who do respond to us, we can find out what happened. But there's always going to be the students who do just disappear, and you sadly don't hear back. And to not know if, like, did they stop out because their parent passed away? It's tough. So I'd really like to be able to get more data on what happened to those students who stopped out during the pandemic. And we've reached out to them through numerous avenues. We've heard back from a lot of them, but there's obviously some that you just don't. Service usage is also a great way of kind of seeing the success of our services, because like I said, even though it's required and mandatory, that doesn't, that doesn't make students come use the services. They still are more inclined because they want to, right? They know there's value in seeing their counselor. They know their counselor is going to help them with something. So the data for fall 2020 and spring 21, we have 4 counselors, 5, maybe 4.5, if you count me, because I'm also a counselor as well. But I just have a little bit less of a caseload now that I'm interim director. But we've had 3,345 appointments during that time period, during fall 20 and spring 21 semester. And then tutoring, there was 1,262 tutoring appointments created. And then, as I mentioned, it's Bill, hearing those comments of like, oh, I don't know what I would do without Miss Sandra. Is Sandra still here? I don't know. One of our counselors was here earlier, but she had to run for an appointment, I think. Hearing that feedback is just, it's really helpful to know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, but also to keep us going, because it can be, it is hard work, right? Like we celebrate the wins, and we also feel the losses with our students. And it has been a tough couple of years for everyone. So, it's great to be able to give counselors it's positive feedback, to know, like, yes, even though it may sometimes feel like they're not hearing us or they're not paying attention, that's the struggle of working with students sometimes, but they are getting what we want them to get most of the time, right? And they are appreciative of the services, and we are making a difference. So yeah, that's, another part of the goal, like other folks have said, aside from getting students to graduate, it's that growth along the way, and that as Christina mentioned, self-efficacy, self-actualization. Like, we do a lot of work with building confidence, because as I mentioned, these are students who would otherwise not be admitted. So that is a huge challenge. That right there, of students feeling that maybe they don't belong here, is a huge challenge. And we do a lot of work on, helping students improve their confidence and know that, yes, you do belong here, right? And you can succeed here. So sorry if I jumped around a little bit, but I hope I covered everything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanderie, and thanks to all of you. I'm just putting everyone's names and titles again in a chat, so when people ask questions, they'll know who to direct it to, I guess. Yeah, I'll just quickly say a couple things. First of all, really great information here. All 4 of these units have clearly stated missions and goals related to those missions. and they assess outcomes related to those goals. And we're working on, in some areas, more direct outcomes they could be measuring as well in terms of actual direct student learning. But one thing that they're already doing a really fantastic job in is in showing their impact. And I just want to say quickly, this is all about finding out, how good a job we're doing with our students. Hunter College's primary mission is educating students. There's a lot of, everything else is commentary, as they say, but no, I mean, educating students, getting them to learn stuff and graduate with a degree. That's the main stuff that we're all here about. And so doing this stuff really plays a big part in helping the whole college fulfill its mission. Obviously, it also helps the individual students, not just their confidence and their knowledge, but their retention and their graduation. And finally, looking at more crass kind of outcomes, student retention is money in the bank, literally. When you retain students and either they pay tuition, continue paying tuition, or the Pell Grant keeps paying for them, that helps the universities, the college's bottom line. And secondarily or quaternarily, it also helps with our ratings. A lot of the ratings look at retention rates and graduation rates. Some of them look particularly at underserved minority groups. Retention and graduation for historically underserved minority groups is part of the CUNY PMP, which is the sort of data goals. It's the data that lets us know if we're meeting the goals. So all kinds of good stuff, going on here. So thank you so much. And I will now turn it over to questions and crosstalk and commentary. Just speak right up.